Hi, my name is Danny Brown. I'm the CEO of Myriad Real Estate Group, and today we're going to talk about how to actually afford buying a home. So when most people talk about mortgages, they're talking about the coveted 30-year fixed or 15-year fixed mortgage, meaning that your interest rate is fixed for that period of time, it doesn't adjust, and your monthly payment is always going to be the same for 15 years or 30 years. Right now, in my opinion, that is the worst deal in real estate. So let me dive a little bit more into why that is. So most people, when they buy a home, it's not their forever home. On average, people tend to buy or sell real estate every 7 to 10 years or every time they have a major life event. So think of growing families, shrinking families, moving to relocate for work, those types of events. And so if you're locking your rate in for 30 years, but you're only going to be in the home for 7 to 10, doesn't really make sense. So that brings me to what is called an ARM, or an adjustable rate mortgage. So an adjustable rate mortgage is fixed for a certain period of time. That can be 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. And the shorter the term, the better your interest rate. So if you want the lowest possible interest rate, you do a 3-year ARM. I personally wouldn't do a 3-year ARM on a personal residence because you're definitely going to be there longer than 3 years. So, but with that being said, the idea behind the ARM is that you're going to have an opportunity to potentially refinance that mortgage into a 30-year fixed mortgage once rates come back down. So the one thing that all experts can agree on is that sometime in the future, we don't know when, could be 1 year, 2 years, whatever, interest rates on 30-year fixes will come down. The market, the volatility that exists will calm down, and we will see that 30-year fixed rate drop. We just don't know when. Before I get a bunch of negative comments in my newsfeed, let's talk about some of the common misconceptions surrounding ARMs. Now, leading up to the 2008 financial crisis that we had, a lot of people were in adjustable rate mortgages. Now, a bunch of those people were in interest-only mortgages, which this isn't that, but they were in adjustable rate mortgages. And what ended up happening is a lot of people like myself were saying, oh, you know, you can be fixed at this rate for now, and then you're just going to refinance in the future. A lot of people are saying that again today. And what ended up happening is those mortgages came to maturity, rates were much higher, and they adjusted up, and now all of a sudden people couldn't afford the mortgage payment anymore, and they went to foreclosure. Well, post-2008, an organization that was created by the government called the CFPB now exists to protect consumers and their credit from predatory practices. And so they put maxes in place on ARMs where it can only adjust by so much at that point in time. So right now, let's say you did a 5-year ARM. Take it all the way to maturity, and let's say your rate was locked in for 5 years at 7%, but now all of a sudden mortgage rates are at 15%. So at the end of 5 years, your rate would adjust by a max of 2 percentage points. So you'd go from 7% to 9%, and now you're locked in for another 6 months. What that does is it's supposed to give you a window of time to be able to figure something out, whether that's refinancing into a 30-year fixed, potentially selling your home. They're trying to give you some time to figure out what your next step is going to be. If you take it to past that 6 months, it will adjust by another 2%, going from 9% to 11%. But the max that it can ever adjust is a maximum of 5 percentage points. So you'll never go up more than 5% or down more than 5% if you take it to the end of your term. Now, if you work with a really good lender, like the ones that we partner with, they're going to make sure that you don't take it to maturity. They're going to contact you and reach out to you to avoid that from happening. And so they're going to make sure that you don't go from a 5-year ARM into just adjusting into whatever rates are. They're going to make sure that you have refinanced over the course of that 5 years into something that's going to be much more longer term if you plan on even staying in the home. Now, most people, like I mentioned, sell every 7 to 10 years. So that just reinforces why I think that a 30-year fixed mortgage right now, at 8% or more, is a really bad product for consumers. What I mentioned a little bit earlier ago was interest-only loans. So most primary mortgages are not interest only. In fact, they don't even offer those programs really anymore. You can get that on a second mortgage, but when you have an ARM, it is fixed. You're making principal and interest payments. It's amortized as if it were a 30-year payment. So your monthly payment is like you're making a fixed mortgage payment over the course of 30 years. Your rate is only locked in though for that 3, 5, 7, or 10-year time frame. Right now, most of your traditional lenders, their ARM programs are not very good. So they're pretty much in line with where a 30-year fixed mortgage is, and that's because all lenders, traditional lenders, have to follow Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae guidelines. And they are selling those mortgages, whether they're an ARM product, 15-year, 30-year fixed, back to Fannie and Freddie, and so they have to follow those guidelines. One of the least explored options that are out there and that people should really be just clamoring for are credit unions. Most of us think of credit unions as not-for-profit companies that offer really good rates on car loans, right? A lot of us have car loans. I would say a majority of us are probably with a credit union, and they're fantastic, super low interest rates. Well, they do the same for housing. They have really great rates on mortgages and much, much better rates on ARM programs, and that's because they do not have to follow Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. They typically keep those mortgages on their books. They're called portfolio loans. And so they make up the guidelines. They have lower fees, much lower interest rates. And what's really nice about them is if you're trying to buy a product or a home, say in a condo community, which is really hard to finance, a lot of credit unions can finance on those properties because they're making the decision for themselves. Is that a safe investment? Is that a safe, are you a safe borrower? Are you going to show a high propensity of paying that mortgage and making those payments on time? So they're not restricted like most lenders are. So they get to make the rules up as they see fit for themselves and their own individual risk tolerances. So you can get much better interest rates, much lower fees through a credit union than you can if you go through a traditional bank or a traditional mortgage lender. So a great example of this is a credit union here locally in Phoenix that we've partnered with that they, just for example, on a 7-year ARM, they're offering 7% interest rate as of November 2023. If you set up a checking account with them with autopay, they're automatically giving you a 0.5% discount on that rate. So you're going from 7% to 6.5%. If you get the seller to contribute towards your closing costs and buy that rate down more, now you're all of a sudden, with a rate in the mid to low 5s because you're getting that seller to pay some upfront interest for you, which is very normal in this housing market. So now all of a sudden you've gone from where a 30-year fixed mortgage is at 8% down to something more reasonable like a 5.5%, making your monthly payment that much more reasonable. The argument that I've been making for a really long time is that the market is soft, that buyers do have a lot of options out there. They've got options in terms of there's more housing on the market. They can beat up on sellers. The one thing holding them back is affordability because everyone's like, well, I can't afford a payment at 8%. Well, if we can get you a payment at 5.5%, now all of a sudden that has just increased your buying power and your ability to take advantage of this market where things are soft. I truly believe that if we start to see mortgage rates come down, with every 1% drop in rates, 5 million people can now afford housing. So if you can beat those people to the punch, you're going to get your home at a much lower price. And when rates do come down, those values are going to be pushed up. So those rates, when they do come down, it's much easier to refinance into a 30-year fixed mortgage when you already own the home than it is to compete with all of those people when those rates do come down. So this is a tool just like anything else. It's not going to be perfect for everybody, but if you use that tool the way that it's intended, you can absolutely take advantage of this housing market and get into something now versus waiting and potentially competing with a lot of other buyers. So if you have any questions about using an ARM, the lenders that we work with or the credit unions that we work with in regards to these products, they're also offering some great down payment assistance programs. One of the credit unions that we partner with is offering up to $29,000 in down payment assistance. Now, of course, there's going to be certain qualifications that you have to meet, But my point being is that there are other options out there other than your standard 15 and 30-year fixed mortgage that buyers should really be exploring in this marketplace, and then managing that tool properly and working with the proper professionals that aren't going to allow you to take it all the way to the end of the term and then causing you to scramble at the end. So work with the right people. If you have questions, let us know. Happy to discuss that. And again, this is just a tool that can get you into a home sooner than later that more people should be taking advantage of. Don't forget to give this a like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.